Welcome to A-Listed, where today we're doing things a little differently.
Emma, you are exactly right. Today, instead of bringing on a guest, Emma and I are digging into brand new research from the Harvard Business Review. And it's interesting because it's all about how recognition influences business performance.
And there's a lot to unpack. The research surveyed more than 500 business leaders and found that 2/3 say recognition matters to business performance, but only 1/3 say their program is working effectively.
I think that gap is actually the story. Most organizations believe that recognition matters, but far fewer are using it strategically to reinforce the behaviors that drive things like collaboration and productivity and growth.
That's right. So today we're going to explore what the highest performing organizations are doing differently and why managers can be both the biggest unlock and the biggest barrier, and how recognition can support major changes like AI adoption.
Time for our new tagline, which is, let's go! So Emma, we're here to talk about a pretty exciting premise, which is that recognition is not a perk, it's a performance system. And I think this report from the Harvard Business Review is actually a big moment for our industry. Harvard Business Review's Analytic services surveyed more than 500 business leaders and spoke with 8 leading experts to understand what recognition can really deliver. And the findings make one thing clear, that recognition isn't a nice to have, it's a business performance strategy. Now, one of the things that popped out to me from the report is that 2/3 of the respondents say that their reward and recognition program is very important for influencing business performance, but only 1/3 say that it's very effective. What gives there?
I think there's 2 angles to this. The first is that recognition doesn't fail because people don't value recognition. It fails because valuing something and actually building the systems to act on it are 2 completely different jobs. And most organizations have only done the first part. They're thinking of recognition as a thank you program. And as we talk about a lot, recognition is far more than a thank you program. It's about driving the right behaviors. It's aligning the program to business to drive the outcomes that business cares about. The second part of that, I think, actually aligns with the research that AWI did going back a couple of years ago, where at that time we found that 63% of HR leaders were going to increase their reward spend in 2024, yet only 40% said that their recognition drives business results. And I think it's actually a measurement problem. I don't think a lot of organizations are actually measuring the impact of their recognition program on their business objectives. They're stuck in program health metrics. They're looking at monthly active usage. They're looking at who's receiving and who's sending recognition. So it's that usage kind of lens on how they're measuring success. The programs who are tying recognition to business outcomes are measuring the impact on CSAT or NPS. They're measuring the impact on sales results. They're measuring the impact on engagement, and they're measuring the impact on retention and so on. And you need multiple data sets in order to do that. So I think those who are thinking about recognition as perhaps not being effective are not measuring it in the right way.
Well, I think you're right. So that's always a great place to start. But I also think that it's one of the reasons I'm so bullish on recognition as a technology is because of what you're describing. I can't think of another technology that can influence every single part of someone's experience at work, nor can I think of another technology that every employee inside an organization, whether they're on a factory floor or at the front desk or on the front line of something, can access. And I think, to your point, the best customers understand that being frequently recognized really does feel good, but you only get the perform better part of that equation when you focus that frequency in a particular direction to a particular outcome that you're trying to drive or a behavior that you're trying to bring to life. And I think the other thing I think about is that part of the disconnect is in what employees find meaningful. You're in part describing a very like flip the switch type of program, which can come off like a bit of a compliance exercise for some employees. And while our research does show that the more frequently someone is recognized, the better they feel, the better they perform, what's also true is that absent meaningful recognition, frequency doesn't matter. It actually becomes pretty annoying. And so you often talk about recognition being a signal to employees and to the rest of the organization. And I think this gap that HBR is describing shows that right now that signal is pretty weak.
It comes down to that, not just the frequency of recognition, but how meaningful that recognition is. And the report calls that out. Like, Durr argues that recognition is powerful but underestimated, and it only works when it's meaningful and it's engaging the person in what they actually accomplished. I was looking at one of our customers' programs recently, and I was looking for those signals. I was trying to understand what behaviors are being driven and what their program tells us about their workforce today. 25% of the recognition in that particular program were what I call broadcast recognition. So they were group recognitions to the whole team. A lot of that was around workplace events, and so it had no behavioural signal in it at all. 12% of the recognition was also 3 words or less. So it was great work, it was thank you, it was those types of really short messages that also has no behavioural signal. And so the opportunity for that organisation is to lift that leadership capability and how to write meaningful recognition. And that's that argument of, or that balance between frequency and meaningful recognition. You need to have both in partnership with each other.
Yeah.
What do you think around the AWI perspective on frequency without that specificity?
I think it becomes noisy and people tune it out over time. You know, it's one of the reasons probably why you and I, one of the more common questions we get is, isn't there such a thing as too much recognition, or why would I recognize someone just for doing their job? And I think it's recognition absent meaning that underlies, you know, those observations. It calls to me to attention the distinction between climate and culture, you know, inside an organization. When you were describing those broadcast recognitions, about 25% of them. So I think those are sort of describing climate, you know, how things feel at our organization. And, you know, there is a real utility and importance in doing that and in connecting people to the big thing that they're a part of. But I think the greater opportunity for recognition and why meaning means so much has to do with culture, where I understand it to be the way that we do things here. And so that distinction, I think, between climate and culture is one of the things I thought of when I delved into this part of HBR's research. So Emma, one of the subject matter experts interviewed as part of this global research study was Robert Durr. And he describes recognition as a compass that directs people's attention, time, and energy. And one of the things he said is that he often sees a gap between how programs are designed and what executives say the business is actually focused on. What did you think about that?
I like it. I think that the compass is very similar to the recognition as a signal analogy that I use quite often, because I think it shows you what's happening, but it also shows you what's not happening. Mm-hmm. So recognition is a signal to the employee who's being recognized. It shows them that they're on track, that what they're doing is meaningful, that they're having an impact, and that they're aligned to the organization's value. It's a signal to the manager of the work they're doing, their performance. It's an opportunity for coaching and so on. And it's a signal to the organization about what good looks like and how work is happening in the organization. So it's very similar to a compass. When that signal is missing, it can show you that the compass is perhaps off track. Perhaps the employees are pointing in a different direction to where the organization is pointing. And so if you're not getting those signals, or if you're getting the signal that is not aligned to where you want your employees to be working and spending their time and the types of behaviors, that's your cue to take action.
We saw this recently with Workday, a customer of ours who, you know, as they are building a foundation for AI everywhere, used recognition fundamentally to call out the everyday AI behaviors that their employees, their workmates, 20,000 globally, were exhibiting in their daily work. And I think what's key about that is it points to the power of positive reinforcement, but it also signals, to use your example, that it's not just outcomes that are acknowledged inside an organization, it's effort. And often in calling that out, that can signal the gap or even the path between good and great.
That's right. When we look at that AI maturity across an organization, we can see from the recognition data where AI is being used and where it isn't. And so for an organization like Workday, we can see that it's not just being used in the engineering teams, but it's actually being used across the customer teams and the sales teams and the administration teams, and it's being used at different rates and in different ways. But recognition is that signal that tells us where those behaviors are taking place and where they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So the report also talked about this manager paradox concept. A supportive manager is the single biggest internal driver of performance overall at 39%. But in those leading organizations, the recognition program itself outranks the manager as the top factor with 37% versus 32%. David, what's your perspective on that role of the manager versus the role of recognition in driving performance?
Yeah, this is an area of personal passion for me and in fact been a focus area, as you know, for AWI's research of the last 6 or 7 years is what do great managers do? Our own foundation of manager effectiveness finds that the best managers do 4 things really well always. They're in frequent contact, they're frequent and meaningful recognizers, and they provide space for both coaching and career development conversations. And with all the CHROs and CEOs that I talk to, how do we help that next generation of managers become better managers is a top of mind issue right alongside the current climate of uncertainty and business transformation and hyper-personalization that we're seeing. What I take from the research is that laggards are betting on manager quality and leaders are betting on systems that work even when the manager quality may vary. And the truth is, research shows that there is great variance in manager quality across organizations. No better than 20% of your managers are exceeding expectations. And so it becomes incumbent upon organizations to manage that middle. And I think it's simply a safer bet at scale. And it's one of the reasons why leader organizations don't let recognition live or die with any one person's personality. One of the other standouts from the report is that recognition is not happening enough. 58% of managers say that they are too busy. 46% are recognizing only at formal moments in the employee experience. 41% say that their culture doesn't promote recognition. And I think for laggards, culture is the biggest barrier at 66%. What are you seeing in these data points, Emma?
To me, it feels like a cop-out.
Yeah, sure.
Saying you're too busy to recognize.
Yeah.
I think every manager should be taking a couple of minutes to reflect and call out the great behavior. One, because it's a good thing to do, but the payoff on that is huge. When I'm managing a team, I'm responsible for their experience at work. I'm responsible for their retention. I'm responsible for their performance. And so if I can impact any of those 3 things by taking a couple of minutes to recognize somebody, that is time well invested. AWI talks about that 1 recognition per month being that minimum standard, and we've said on this podcast before, that's a bar you should trip over. Is 1 recognition per employee per month is enough to impact business metrics. So let's do it weekly and make those impacts astronomical. Let's multiply the impact that we have there. So the opportunity, I think, for the organizations is to think about how to design recognition as a system that doesn't take too long, that it's easy to access, that it's in the flow of work, and design the system for how busy the manager is to create that opportunity for them to recognize more often and cut out the excuses.
Positive reinforcement is a great motivator. So is shame. So shame is part of what I say here. But in truth, what I believe is that we're living through this period of great uncertainty. You know, we have headwinds, there are tailwinds, there's just the function of doing your job every single day. Some of the AWI research shows that most employees, a whopping 92%, are unclear about what's expected of them at work. And when I think about this, you know, most employees are paid every 2 weeks. Other than the paycheck, they may have no signal that they're doing a good job. And so I think you're exactly right. You know, in this instance, I think managers have this enormous responsibility to be the sense makers, to connect employees to what their first next step might be, to say keep going through that positive and meaningful reinforcement. So saying you're too busy, that boat don't float for me.
It doesn't. And look, let's not underplay what's being asked of managers at the moment. There's a lot going on in the world. And I think, you know, sort of post-pandemic through to today is managers are being asked to almost play a counselor role to their employees, that support from a leader is critical, and we're asking a lot. In a lot of situations, we're actually not enabling and increasing the capability of the leaders to do that. Recognition is one of the ways we can do that. We can support our leaders with the right tools, with the right insights, with the nudges that go along with a recognition system to help them recognize more, and it actually takes some of the burden off the leader.
I think you're exactly right. And I think that we often forget that managers are people too. You know, they don't have their name on the building. They're not signing the checks. And I think it's also true that, you know, the time frame that you reference is exactly right. It although I don't have the data in hand to prove this, it does feel like over the last number of years we've left, you know, a very one-size-fits-all approach to managing people to a time of hyper-personalization. And I think it's way harder to be a manager today, especially as we live through the advent of AI and, you know, employees wondering about, you know, what they should do or whether they should experiment or whether a robot's going to take their job. So again, I come back to your point about recognition being a critical signal and helping employees make sense of the world around them. And I think to your other point, you know, recognition sends a signal, whether it's sent or not. And so, you know, the truth is, if you're a manager, your people are looking to you anyway, whether you are modeling behavior through frequent and meaningful recognition or not sending it. And so I think you want to be showing up for your people in the right way.
Absolutely. Silence is not read as neutral. If a manager is silent, if they are not recognizing, if they are not having regular one-on-ones and coaching and development conversations, those 4 elements of manager effectiveness you mentioned earlier, it's actually read as negative. So employees will fill that space with the worst possible scenario. They don't see me. I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not performing. Like, that negative conversation that happens inside your head happens when managers are silent. And Amy Edmondson is also mentioned in this report, and she does some amazing work around psychological safety. And she notes that people are hardwired to be sensitive to hierarchy. So recognition from someone from a position of power, so a leader, lands differently than peer recognition. This is a psychological safety finding that's actually wearing recognition clothing.
I like that.
We talk a lot about trust with AWI. What's the role of recognition coming from a leader? What does that play out in terms of trust and connection and that relationship between the employee and the leader?
Yeah, I love how you just in this conversation, you've already been moving the bar in terms of, the cadence of recognition that managers should aspire for and employees should begin to expect. To your point, we talk about monthly recognition being the bar, but what we see when we move the needle to weekly, employees recognize weekly are 11.5 times more likely to trust their manager. They're nearly 12 times more likely to receive coaching. And what we all know is that for all the really big things that you are trying to do, whether it's bring behaviors to life or go from here to there or climb the really big thing, if you do not have trust, you do not have anything. And one of the things Amy Edmondson calls out in this report is she says, quote, "We all have a hardwired sensitivity to hierarchy. So while it's absolutely fantastic when a peer says that they appreciate you, when someone in a position of power says that, it's a game changer." And I've made a career of not disagreeing with Amy.
Good move.
Thank you. Okay, Emma, we've been talking about the importance of managers recognizing frequently and meaningfully. We've talked about the impact on psychological safety and trust. Do you have another reason why managers should be great at recognition?
There's always more reasons, David, but I'm going to pick one. And that's because it works on engagement. Bob Nelson's research in the article found that managers who consistently use recognition give one explanation, and that's because it works. Kyndryl, which is one of the Achievers customers mentioned, found managers in the top quartile of recognition giving had meaningfully higher engagement scores themselves. So it's not just something that the manager does for their team, it's a behavior that makes the manager more connected to their own work and to their own team. So it's a great lever to pull for their direct reports.
I think that's so interesting. We've done some of our own strategic insights projects with customers and have found similarly that recognition the sending of recognition has a surprisingly positive impact for the senders. Impacts on retention for a healthcare organization we work with, but it makes me think that that's an effect of positive reinforcement, a reminder for the sender of what our values are or what great or good might look like. Do you think that too?
I do, because I think that thinking about the good things that you've seen, been a part of, experienced, witnessed, is actually really good for your mental health. And so I think that moment of reflection, that moment of gratitude, that moment of thinking about the people I work with did something great today, they made a difference today. There's a lot of power in that. Similar to journaling, to meditation, I think recognition, sending recognition and the thinking about, reflecting about what you've seen is incredible for mental health.
Yeah, I think there's something about writing it down. I found this in different aspects of my life. There's something about seeing it on a page or on a screen that connects you. And I find it a phenomenal survival mechanism, quite frankly, as you navigate the highs and lows and maybe the boring middles that accompany a life at work. So I love that. One of the other chunks that's really interesting in this body of research is around recognition's impact on something the bright lights at Harvard are calling artificial intelligence. I haven't heard this term before, Emma, but our own research does show, and I think the Harvard Business Review research sort of confirms that the gap that we're seeing and a lot of the tension that employees are experiencing is not about the tools themselves, but it's about human behavior.
Absolutely. So many organizations are thinking about AI transformation as a technology project, and they're forgetting about the humans that are involved. So And you're seeing that in the results that organizations are reporting back on their AI transformation. So MIT reported that 95% of AI transformations have no ROI attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that there is a gap there, and the gap is human behavior. And so we need to be firstly creating the conditions where employees feel safe to try, safe to experiment, safe to learn publicly. I think that's the piece I feel most uncomfortable with. I like to share my work once I know it's good, once it's finished, once it's polished. I'm such a perfectionist when it comes to these things. And the idea of using AI to do something or create something and share something when I know it's not perfect and I don't know what I don't know is deeply uncomfortable. And so recognition plays a really big role in making it safe for me to do that, to share, to learn publicly, to fail publicly. And so recognition is really critical in closing that gap we see with behavior when it comes to AI transformation.
I think one of the other things that's maybe unique about this moment that we're living through with AI is that so many business transformations historically have been top down. They're very much part of a command and control, decide on high, cascade down to all employees, what the call to action is. And there's an element of that is driving investment in AI. But what's also true is that it's bottom up. We're seeing employees every day experimenting to varying degrees in their own way with tools that offload the tasks that they find boring or really don't like to do, or try to give them time back. And I think this top down, bottom up is creating a lot of pressure for employees. And I think what's also true, and our research shows this, is that just 1 in 5 employees feel supported, trained, and prepared for AI. And so what are you thinking about that?
I think that's absolutely right, is that it is bottom up and top down. And the tension that creates is there's a lot of worried InfoSec teams around how AI is being used. Like, is it in line with values? Is our data safe? And so the role that recognition can play there is recognizing the positive AI behaviors. It's recognizing AI use that is in line with our organizational values. It's recognizing those who applied judgment and critical thinking to the outputs. And that requires paying attention. That requires a real sort of thoughtful process from the people around the people being recognized to pay attention to when that judgment is being applied, because that's the human contribution to the work that is being delivered with AI.
A couple of things are interesting here to me. One is that positive reinforcement does seem to be a fuel that fuels the engine of change inside an organization. And so this seems to me a moment not just to call out the good things that people are doing, but to do it frequently and meaningfully, as we've been talking about throughout this broadcast. But as I zoom out from the current moment, it occurs to me that these are the same motions that work for any transformation inside an organization. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Employees are unclear. They are unsure. They're worried about their jobs. They need encouragement. These are the conditions that we're trying to transform businesses with. At the moment, it's AI transformation. It might be a restructure. It might be a merger and acquisition. Whatever transformation that business is going through, those are the conditions that they're currently operating in. Is 1 in 5 employees don't feel a sense of belonging. They don't feel connected to the organization. And we're asking them to do more and do things differently. Like, we have to change the conditions for the employees in order for any of those transformations to be successful.
it reads to me almost, because so much of the conversation seems to me about the cost of these technologies, the cost of labor in comparison, and then also capabilities, this great reskilling that's going to be happening inside organizations as they change shape. But I don't know that this is necessarily a skills gap entirely. What you're describing about belonging and trust, this almost reads to me like a safety gap. Like the employees don't feel comfortable to experiment or vulnerable, as you were describing of yourself earlier, to show what they're working on before it's picture perfect.
That's it. It goes back to Amy Edmondson's research around psychological safety, that what she shows is that the high-performing teams are the ones who can surface failures faster. They're not the ones that don't fail. They're the ones where they feel safe to experiment and safe to speak up. And so I think that is really critical in the environment we're operating in today. Is we need to create the environments where our teams feel safe to speak up, where they feel safe to experiment. Because we want people to call out if the AI is wrong, if it's hallucinating. We want them to step in and apply judgment. We want them to try new ways of working. We want them to try to redesign tasks that they're currently doing manually with AI. But we have to support them in doing that. So, David, how does that align with AWI's perspective on the role that recognition plays in these scenarios?
What our 6th annual State of Recognition report shows, which is a global study of nearly 5,000 employees and HR professionals, is that there are some pretty specific things that employees want to be recognized for through this era of AI. More than a third want to be recognized for learning new skills. A third want to be recognized for their creativity and their innovation. Nearly an equal percentage want to be recognized for the way they collaborate and the way they care for customers. And again, just about a third want to be recognized for their adaptability and that the resilience that they show every single day. And I think the truth is that these are skills worth bringing to light every single day and at scale, because these are not only the behaviors that will help individuals survive what feels like a survivable moment right now through this period of great uncertainty, but truthfully, any moment and any period of change inside an organization. And so the data from AWI is pretty clear on this. So much to unpack. We could spend hours and hours and hours going through this report, and we in fact hope that people will do just that, and more than that, apply the learnings from this seminal piece of research from the Harvard Business Review. But Emma, I'll give the last word to you. Any last best bits that jump out from the pages of this report?
Yeah, I want to finish with a quote from GM's Arden Hoffman, and they say, "If a company cares about their employee experience, reward and recognition is a very reasonable, frankly cheap, way to celebrate success, make people feel recognized, and keep people connected, especially in a hybrid workforce." And as a HR leader, you need to understand what executives in your business are asking for, and you need the right data to put the whole story together to show what this can deliver. I think that says it all.
I think it does, and what a great opportunity to share with you some of the exciting things from this big piece of research from the Harvard Business Review, and for all our listeners of A-Listed, where every 2 weeks we're talking about the stories and the science of appreciation at work. And what we hope this research does is continue the conversation in confirming what we know, which is that recognition is not a nice to have, but a need to have for organizations that want to do great things and great by their people. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on A-Listed.
And if you're not a HBR subscriber, you can download the report for free from achievers.com.